put you in a nice conference room right down the side of Haggard Secure Jail, and we'll let you look at them all day.
Sure does.
Who's had those out? Oh, yes, I can.
I'm not teasing you for looking at it.
See, they figured it out. Our law enforcement last year says you were not in the city airport, you were not. So somebody, like they said, popped up with and we have the documents ready. You just call us, we'll wrap your date time, and we'll put you in a nice conference room. You know, right this and everybody.
I've told you, these boards not one call for you. Just make sure.
So we make you schedule.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't remember.
Yeah.
You want to look at, did you get that?
I've got one.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. No. So do you vote? So do I what?
Do you vote on evaluation committees?
No.
No? I've seen both sides of that argument. Both prefers that we do, so.
I have in the past, but
And I do if it's something that we're really familiar, especially then I do, but he prefers that we read through the whole thing and understand it and vote. But sometimes I have to ask questions and be like, because I mean, like, I just said, I don't remember which one it was, and right now we've got life insurance just came in, the life and long-term disability and all that. I don't understand all the, it's not my specialty, you know?
Like that, all that Aruba and Palto and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, but, okay, I was just curious. Oh.
I guess I gotta bring this back up when we get back. Hey, by the way, there's this topic I mentioned like in August and then we forgot about it. And we never brought it to Boyce.
Yeah, no, I wrote that down.
Well, we got busy and it really didn't become that important
I still have
anymore.
a form on my desk too.
So,
I can't remember what it is right off the top of my head, but I have it on my desk.
That one, I don't think it's as big a deal as what I can for the ones that aren't keeping. I'm like, man, it's such a good idea.
That is a good idea.
Like they have meetings from the beginning.
Yeah, which I think is awesome.
Which would have solved the whole need for the form if we had a meeting. Like my fire truck, I could have met with the fire truck and said, okay, here's my 9 pages worth of questions. But as soon as I get my first question is going to be the phone. I've got to go to Orbit and find out how we buy this fire truck, because there might be rules that apply to these fire trucks that I don't know now. Because the last thing I did was check the funding source. I don't know how we're buying this fire truck.
oh, it's kind of scary. Have a mistake.
Add that to my notes on my thing that says what departments need to be involved. Next note would be, what's the funding source? Because I've never once thought about the funding source would change the threshold So if I'm buying,
I mean,
Yeah.
that's, it's okay, Jim just put stuff up before the
glasses, I cut it before I left yesterday. Boyce sent me a requisition, I cut the PO, I submitted my email, and I got left. Well, what if that was grant funded and the threshold was $1,000 and not $5,000? Then I just broke the law. Because I did, it was cameras for the police department.
And I would say that I told you so. I don't know what she was doing. She went off the reservation.
So since it was under $5,000, our threshold says I didn't have to bid it out. So I just cut a PO.
Can you
and
tell
just
that
paid
by
for
the,
it.
well, you may not be able to, I guess. I can tell by our account number.
Yeah, because we have project funding instead of operations funding.
Right.
What they call PTO. So they put in like project award task and all this.
Yeah.
It's different. Yeah. So
I
it's
I
different
know
than
when I have
operations.
federal funding that whatever account they use starts with an F.
Now, see, that's cool because ours is not necessarily coded that way.
Yeah.
Except on side of the world, they'll have like KAT 507-863. So that's the federal line. And then there'll be a KAT 507-863.
I know, I'm like,
And
I know,
then
I didn't
so
break
you
the
know which
law
is the
just
state.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Matches.
Well, and our project number also would be like F271 or something, so.
So going forward, I will know how to do this. It's a matter of, oh crap, what if I just did this and didn't know?
And it does help to know if it's
To
federal
be-
versus state, because those are different.
But yeah, our Title I all has a project number on the end of it, so I can always
It
tell
was under
Title I, Title II.
$5,000, I bought it and went on my merry way. I sure would love to know if I could have
I bet you don't have grant user access, but I might need it because that's, I can show you because then you can go look and see.
But I can go pull up the PO and see what the funding is when I get back.
And then we
But
can look
it-
at it on the grant side and see if it's capital.
Okay, I'm gonna kick it off here soon as Julie takes the seat.
You wait for me. Oh, no, you don't. We've got this really cool stuff in here. Wait a minute, I gotta find you.
Where's Lynn? Make sure Lynn's here so she can add Lynn.
Pardon me, Boyce, give me a moment. I should know this book inside and out.
It's on the first page.
Boyce Evans, CPPO, purchasing agent, City of Knoxville. Boyce graduated from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville with a degree in economics. He earned his master's degree, MBA, from Strayer University in Washington, D.C. He is a graduate of the U.S. Army's Command and General Staff College in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Boyce served in the U.S. Army for over 70 years in various state and size. What did I do?
20.
Dang, I think I read, okay.
Really good.
Wait, it looks
Do
good.
you want me to keep it on? Stop it, you know what I meant. Okay, so we're gonna start with 20 years in various stateside assignments. Stop. And multiple overseas combat tours as an infantry officer, Panama, the Balkans, and the Middle East. He served for approximately 8 years in various business positions for the Army as a budget officer in Washington, D.C., comptroller for the 1st Cavalry Division at Fort Hood, Texas, and as the chief financial officer for Fort Campbell, Kentucky. He retired as a lieutenant colonel from the Army in 2005 and has served for just over 12 years as the purchasing agent for the city of Knoxville. Time flies, huh, boys? He is a native of Clinton, Tennessee. He is married to Teresa A. Evans, also of Clinton, and they have one son who is an attorney in the greater Knoxville area. You've got help. He has one granddaughter and a grandson and enjoys hunting and fishing. I give you boys.
Before I get started, you know what my granddaughter said the other day? She's about 3.5. She looked at my wife. My wife takes care of him through the week while my son and his wife are working. Anyway, she looked at my wife. She said, you know, it feels good to be a grown-up. You can't make that stuff up. Okay, why am I here? The reason I'm here and is to, well, let's go back even further than that. sometime last year, unbeknownst to me, the MTPPA, TAPP, and ETPA decided that, and I mean really unbeknownst to me because I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, they at least wanted to take a look at potentially merging all three of those chapters into one, what you call a statewide chapter. And then I got elected by about an 18-person committee, I think it was, to be the chair of the committee that is doing the merger study. I want to emphasize study, because this committee, some of whom members are here in the room, we don't make the decision on that. The memberships of ETPA, MTPPA, and TAPP will make that decision based on their vote. We're simply studying it to give you all the information that we can so that you can cast your vote at the appropriate time and make the right decision, what you feel is the right decision. That's why I'm here. Okay. No pitch is complete without a purpose slide, and there it is right there. I want to describe to you what's been accomplished to date, where we're probably going to go in the way ahead, try to answer any questions you've got. There's the agenda right there. I'll talk through the objectives, what we have accomplished to date. Advantages and disadvantages of a merger. What we're looking at is we consider the bylaws development. There are a few people in here that are working on that, and where we're looking at going at from here. Here's the objectives. Thoroughly explore the advantages and disadvantages of potential merger. Recommend to the various memberships whether this 18-person committee feels, and by the way, let's take all the mystery out of that. All right, who's on this 18-person committee? If you look at slide 5, you'll see it. You've got 6 members from ETPA, 6 from MTPPA, and 6 from TAPP. So it's properly distributed. Me and a few others are members of both ETPA and TAPP, or vice versa. But those are the folks that are making up the committee. And like I say, there's some here: Lori, Penny, Debbie, Susan. I mean, there's various folks that are here. Anyway, back to this one. So we're going to recommend whether we feel like, based on our study, whether a merger is the appropriate move or not. And the key thing is to provide you all of the information that you need, both to TAPP, MTPPA, who I've already gone and talked to briefly last month, and ETPA, so that you can make the right decision. One of the things in making the right decision, or what you perceive to be as the right decision, is having some good draft bylaws. Because how do you know what you're voting for if you don't know what the bylaws of that organization would be? All right. Accomplished to date. We established the merger committee. I showed you that. We've thoroughly explored the advantages and disadvantages of a potential merger. We'll talk to some of those here in a minute. And we've established a subcommittee to prepare the draft bylaws. We've got it, Bonnie Woodard, the purchasing director for the city of Chattanooga. She volunteered, and she's reviewing the Tennessee Nonprofit Act to make sure that in our bylaws we don't run afoul of that. You got Susan Husky, who's here, Matt Myers from Knox County, working on the committees and miscellaneous sections of the bylaws. And you got Lori Bryant, who's also here, Jasmine Quattlebaum from MTPPA, that are working on the membership meetings and voting, board of directors section, and the officers section of the bylaws. Our goal is to get this out to the rest of the merger study committee by mid-July. That sounds like we're sandbagging it. We're not. It takes a lot of time. We've all got day jobs, just like everybody here. You get to the end of the week, you finally got a little time to work on it, and that's what you do. And our subcommittee on preparing those draft bylaws is meeting now every 3 weeks, just so you know. Already gone through that slide. Advantages of merging, and I'm going to get me a sip of water while I'm talking, but I think everybody will hear me. One of them is that we'll speak with one voice, whether we're talking to NIGP, and in particular, the state legislature with regard to proposed legislative changes. Just to be frank, they want to hear from 3 different chapters. They're going to want to hear from one that represents everybody in the state. The other one, it reduces the duplication of volunteering and a lot of the efforts. We've got, and I wrote it down, there's a lot of overlap. And I didn't realize it this way till I got into this. But first off, as far as membership, just so you know what the members are, TAPP's got 136 members. ETPA's got 105. MTPPA's got 27. This is a couple months old. This ebbs and flows. But anyway, with that, 44% of the people in ETPA are also in TAPP. 15% of the people in MTPPA are in TAPP. And 33% of the folks in TAPP are also in ETPA. Volunteers, as far as the duties and so forth, the organizations, there's 17% overlap between TAPP and ETPA, 10% from MTPPA and TAPP. So there is some duplication of efforts and in volunteering. Economy, obviously, you know, your funds are maximized if you're one organization. I know TAPP has, one of us, ETPA or TAPP's got, was it Star Chapter, and then there's something else?
ETPA has Star Chapter and TAPP has Chapter Manager.
Okay.
Manage the website.
So
registration. We pay for.
Yeah, so you'd only be paying for one. That's just one example. This could go on into whatever else we decide to buy. Maybe we want a social media something, I don't know, or hire a consultant to look at social media, whatever, but it would be shared by all. So that gets to the economy of scale and purchases issue there too. You'd have only one web page to maintain and so forth. There's some definitely economy. Fundraising efforts potentially reduced. I say potentially because if each area still wants to have their own fundraising events, see why they couldn't, but you may be able to reduce the fundraising efforts. Big one, equal access to the legislative committee. If you're from West Tennessee and you're in procurement and you're not a member of TAPP or one of these other organizations, actually, if you're not a member of TAPP, come to think of it, you really don't have access to a legislative committee. Now, TAPP's is called the Public Affairs Committee. Legislation just happens to be one of the things that they do. But one of the advantages to a statewide chapter, and it's rather significant, is equal access to that legislative committee. And I can tell you, I was the chair of the legislative committee for 3, maybe 4 years for TAPP, and we got a lot of things done. They're still getting a lot of things done, and that was very important. Susan Husky back here about midway through the room got that re-energized in TAPP, and it's been going great guns ever since. That's an important one. West Tennessee folks, you know, if we had a statewide chapter, we might be able to draw more of them into it, okay? And they'd have more say in what a statewide chapter is doing. As I understand from talking to some other folks, namely Terry McKee on that one, who's been at this stuff a lot longer than I have, West Tennessee used to have a fairly significant presence in these NIGP affiliate chapters like we are here in TAPP. But because there was no, over time, there just wasn't many events held where they'd be going to them and so forth, they kind of dropped off. Now, it's kind of had a resurgence a bit when Lord Bryant was down there in Collierville and started doing these lunch and learns, bringing some people sort of back into the fold. But there's not as much participation there as there very well could be. And a statewide chapter has the potential to bring more of them into the fray. Some disadvantage, and I'm not giving, this is by no means a comprehensive list, and this is no means a comprehensive list of disadvantages. Here's some of the disadvantages we've looked at in some detail. One is resistance to change. I mean, that's the human factor. Nobody likes change. If somebody tells you they like change, they're probably telling you a story. Most people just generally do not like change, at least not if it personally affects them. Less autonomy. I mean, if you got a statewide chapter, there's going to be a little bit less autonomy. Now, we want to limit that, so we have proper degrees of autonomy in the 3 grand divisions of the state, East, Middle, and West. But at the end of the day, I don't see any other way than there would be some less autonomy. Fewer opportunities to serve in leadership roles. That concerns me from the younger members coming up. Right now, if you've got ETPA, TAPP, and MTPPA, you have a chance for your younger members, you know, late 20s, early to mid 30s, that type of thing, that haven't been in, maybe they're not in a supervisory position at work or a manager, but they have the opportunity to serve on the executive board as the secretary, the treasurer, the vice president, the president, and be put in charge of some, you know, major muscle moves for their various organizations. That's important. That's important. And there would be less of those opportunities. I wrote down here, less effective networking. What does that mean? Well, you know, I'm be 57 here next week, I think. You have a larger pool to network with if it's a statewide chapter, but let's face it, a lot of that networking is going to be done by email, Skype, social media. I don't know what all these other means, because our state is so geographically dispersed. I mean, it's one of the longest states that there are. I mean, it really is close to California. So a lot of it's going to be not face-to-face. And face-to-face to me is the best type of networking communication. Potentially less effective decision-making, potential membership apathy. All these last 4 kind of go together. Let's talk about what I mean. There is the potential, if you don't do it right, to have all or most all of the members of the executive board of directors for a statewide chapter being from one area of the state. Well, that's not good for the other 2 areas of the state if that were to happen. Okay? And there's also the potential, when that happens, to get out of touch with the people that you represent. That's another big concern right there. So that gets to maybe not representing them as well as you should. Whereas right now, I know, like ETPA, quarterly meetings, you know, you see people all the time, you know what they're thinking, you know what they're going through. Statewide, you're probably not going to meet quarterly, probably not. And so you have some trouble there, potential. Also, increased membership apathy. I mean, we see this all the time in voting. You know, the thought being somebody at the state chapter level is going to make that decision. My vote doesn't count. What do I care? That type of attitude. I would hope that it wouldn't prevail, but there's a risk of that. These are just some of the things that we really took a look at. And I want to tell you, as we're drafting the bylaws right now, we're trying to combat or minimize the effects, potential effects of these things. We're trying to provide for a proper degree of autonomy. We're trying to, you know, work it out so there's proper representation on the board of directors from the various grand divisions of the state. And this one right here, which I failed to cover, or where is it? Potential resistance from ETPA, and I'm a member of ETPA. That's talking about the dollars. ETPA, for those of you who don't know, raises thousands upon thousands of dollars with the business matchmaking event they do and have been doing for years. Well, you know, I don't know. Nobody's personally told me that, but I mean, if you're working your tail off and you're raising all this money, the thought could be, well, why do I want to give all that money to other areas of the state? I busted my tail to make this happen, you know? Same thing could be said if it was being done in West Tennessee or Middle Tennessee, as it relates to East. But so there's some potential resistance there. Nobody's really come up and said that's a real problem. But one of the things we're trying to do, where I was going with that is, as we're setting up the bylaws, we're looking at, well, what do we do? You know, what do we do about if you've got a fundraising event in a certain area of the state? And what we're looking at is, okay, well, obviously the state, well, I would think obviously the statewide chapter would need to tax some of that at least. Otherwise, you're going to have a statewide chapter that has no money, no power. But at the same time, maybe some of that needs to be earmarked for local use where it was raised in the first place. So we're looking at stuff like that. Here's some considerations that leads nicely into this. For the bylaws development, I mentioned that we want to have a sufficient degree of autonomy established for each of the regions, so that each region can, you know, they can hold their own meetings. I mean, I'm not going to drive from, you came from Collierville. I wouldn't drive from Knoxville to Collierville for a quarterly meeting or something. I might drive to Bristol or Chattanooga or somewhere, but I'm just not going to do it, you know. So the grand divisions have got to be able to hold their own meetings and events if they want to. I don't know if there's a requirement for that, but they need to be able to. And they probably need to be able to at least retain the preponderance of what they raise with a fundraising event. The board's got to reflect the geographic regions of the state. And that next one is what we're talking about, that by appointing, we're looking at potentially some regional ambassadors. I propose the idea, and I don't know if we're going to run with it or not, but of 2 regional ambassadors from each of the 3 geographic regions of the state to be on the board of directors. In my vision of what the board of directors would look like, you would have like a vice president, a president, a treasurer, a secretary, a database manager. That's becoming a big thing with other states. I think it's a good idea. There's reasons for that we can talk to later. And then you got 6 other people, 2 from west, 2 from middle, 2 from east, that are simply there to support their section of the state. So in my ideal thing, it would be 11. But I think Lori's on that, the portion of that committee that's looking at that with, is it Matt?
Jasmine.
Anyway, they're looking at that. Maybe it doesn't need to, because you had told me that one time there was something like that way back, and then they couldn't get enough,
I don't
they
know
had
what
trouble
the
getting
purpose-
enough people there.
Yeah,
or
I don't know
something.
why the bylaws got changed, but
So,
it's sometime in the late 80s or early 90s. It went away.
so maybe that's not doable. But suffice it to say, we need to have
Sometime in the 90s.
proper geographic representation. I do think, and we're considering that in the bylaws developed, statewide chapter be vested with the sole authority for a legislative committee. Also with consideration of bylaws, I already mentioned this, statewide chapters got to have the ability to tax. One of the things that we're bouncing around in our noggins is the president potentially having the ability to serve for 2 years. I served as the president of ETPA one time. Heck, I served as the president of the American Society of Military Comptrollers right here in Fort Campbell, Clarksville area years ago. It's a pretty good sized organization, ASMC. And I can tell you, 1 year, you don't really have a chance to accomplish your objectives, what's on your agenda. You just don't. Ask some of the past presidents, I'd suspect they're going to tell you the same thing. So that's a possibility. We're thinking about it. We're talking about potentially rotating the membership meetings to different areas of the state. One being in Nashville every year, at least one, because it is the center of the state. That's why the state legislature does all their business down there at Legislative Plaza. It's geographically the center of the state, not to mention the capital. And the other one, maybe 2 meetings a year as a minimum. The other one rotates from east to west, to east to west, to east to west, so that again, everybody's got the ability to meet one of those. We are looking though at the board of directors having to meet at least quarterly. Because if you're on the executive board, if you really want to keep your head in the game, know what's going on, got your finger on the pulse, plan for upcoming events, you need to be meeting at least quarterly. And that needs to, we're looking at that, establishing that in the bylaws. Possibly establishing a finance or a budget committee to prepare an annual budget to at least, to be approved by the membership or at least the executive board. Other chapters, I didn't see this in ETPA and TAPP and so forth. I know Lynn has always been the person I think of as the perpetual treasurer, like for ETPA. We collect the money, it's all accounted for and it's laid out there, but then as far as a formal strategic plan for how those funds are spent, I hadn't really seen that. I know there's some discussion about it, but I think it needs to be more of a formal. If you've got a statewide chapter with potentially, add up all those numbers, you're well over, you're approaching the 150, 200 mark of people being members. Probably ought to have some sort of consolidated budget for the organization. So potentially establishing a committee for that. Also, having a valid succession plan. You know, what happens when somebody resigns, somebody dies, somebody just quits, whatever. Having a good succession plan for that board of directors. And also some regular auditing of the finances, either by an internal audit committee, or it can be an external third party if you got enough money to afford it. But because again, the bigger an organization gets, the more money it's got coming in, the more there's a need of that to make sure nothing outlandish happens. I do want to draw your attention to this last little starburst here, which is in green. Sorry about it being in green, it's hard to read, but bylaws are not an operational manual. What do I mean? The bylaws are not going to speak to every potential contingency that can come up. They're just not. Just like, talk where we're at, the city of Knoxville, we've got the code of ordinances, and in there is a big section on procurement. I carry it around with me in my notebook. I know it well. That's pretty general. We also, though, have procurement policies and procedures that do speak to a whole lot of potential contingencies. That is kind of analogous to this. We need an operational manual, somewhat like South Carolina has, or one of these other ones that got a statewide chapter that gives some more detail on how things are done. Okay, but the bylaws are not going to do that. And you don't want to make the bylaws so restrictive that they tie the president and the executive board's hands so that they can't make decisions for the good of the chapter when they need to in a hurry. So you got to strike the right balance there. The way ahead, here's just a couple things. One, bottom line is by mid-July, like I mentioned a little while ago, we want to have a draft of the bylaws out to this small 6-person committee, out to the whole 18-person committee. And then there'll be this series of they comment, we get it, get our feelings hurt, we revise it, we get it out again, they comment, we revise it, so forth until we are ready to distribute it. The committee at large feels like it's ready to distribute to the general membership of TAPP, MTPPA, and ETPA. So that in the fall of 18, this year, we can recommend to you whether we think a merger makes sense or not, and then each chapter votes separately on whether to merge or not. And it's got to be 75% of your or more have got to agree to merge, or it doesn't happen. And we're looking at electronic voting because everybody can't be to the meetings. I mean, look right here. It's the end of the day. TAPP's got what, 136 people? We got about close to 30 in the room. A lot of people are gonna have to cast their votes electronically. Now, I put this green starburst here, very important. It really ought to be up here. I don't know if that's gonna be done in the fall of 18 or not. I'll just tell you, I don't. We'll see where we are, but there's, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not gonna rush it. I'm not gonna rush
And
it.
the other issue is we have to have time to nominate slates
true.
of officers and get them. It has to be out to the memberships 30 days ahead, so it might get, the timeline might get way condensed to where we wouldn't have enough time to make it happen by the end of the year, so. Yeah, we just have forum going on, that little thing.
There's a lot going, forums, I was really thinking of forum. You're right, though. I remember,
Yeah.
it's been 8 years ago now since I was president of ETPA, but there's a certain amount of time by which you gotta get something out to the membership, so they have a chance to digest it and think about it before you can vote on it, and I don't remember what that
30
is,
days.
but, so, I'm just saying, the fall of 18, that may not happen, it may be a little while past that. Okay, that's the down and dirty. Like I say, I wanted to stick and move on that. So I know I'm the last thing between you and happy hour or driving home or going to eat or whatever. But please ask me any questions you got. We don't know what we don't know. Come on now, somebody wants to be that kid on Friday afternoon, raising their hand right before the bell rings, holding their classmates up. Questions?
When will we have discussion on this? Will this be on tomorrow's membership
We
meeting
can talk about it
agenda?
tomorrow. I think Debbie, did you put it on your?
I'm not gonna be there. I'm driving back right after this, but I mean, you know enough about it, so. There's nothing secretive about it. I mean, I gave you everything right there.
We're really not anywhere yet, it's just still an investigation.
Except we're working
It's still
except we're preparing what
a very
the
big
bylaws, what they
investigation.
would look like,
Right.
probably if we did that.
I, for one, would like to have an opportunity to share opinions, and hear other people's opinions.
Sure.
Well, we've got time for discussion now,
We can do it
too.
now.
So
or
we need to get
maybe
the
we'll
Gmail.
whichever time.
I was
So we
about
can
to
all
say-
meet that
Maybe
Gmail,
a hangout.
that Gmail
Yeah,
account,
hangout. Yeah, that's it.
and that way we don't have to try.
Yeah.
You're not there to set it up for him.
Feel up to discussing now, or do you wanna wait?
We're sitting down, and I think we're gonna talk.
I mean, we can talk if you want to.
Well, I don't want to cut off any nuts and bolts questions, but are we okay on time? I think I goofed us up on time.
We
No,
make
you're
time,
fine.
right?
Bar doesn't open for another 20-some minutes anyway.
The
so-
bar? Is
Yeah,
that-
there's a bar here.
Okay, Brian.
And he likes beer.
Well, we could ask the
Drinks beer.
bartender to come in here.
Yeah, we can deliver it.
I guess I think this is a great idea, personally, and I hope we do it. I look at your list of disadvantages, and I kind of think of that as a checklist of things we need to be sensitive to and figure out how we can minimize the risk or address so that we avoid that problem. But I hope we go this path. It seems to me that the legislative committee, the ability to use the software to send queries out to our colleagues between conferences, those two things right there are reason to have a strong statewide chapter representing. I would like, when I send out a query, to be having the advantage of opinions and ideas from all around the state.
So I have a question as a TAP member. Do I not have the ability to communicate with the whole state now?
as a TAP member?
If someone's
not
in
everybody's-
MTPPA, but they're not a member of TAPP.
Right, or somebody's a member of ETPA and they're not a member of TAP, then they do not get that. Because it's only TAP. We purchased the module last year for that Member Connect through the website. And so but it's typically only TAP members can use that.
You know, I think an easy way to solve the autonomy of things is if you had a statewide chapter, and that be your own chapter in the state, that each region still have, you know, at least 2 quarterly or 2 meetings a year or something, and make it in there that each region have, or be encouraged to have their own meeting in their location at least once or twice a year in addition to the TAP conferences. That would give them maybe 2.
I actually like that idea because one of the biggest disadvantages in my mind, I'm going to tell you right now, everybody in earshot, I hadn't made up my mind. I mean that. I came in this undecided. I'm still undecided. But one of the biggest concerns I've had is you kind of miss the camaraderie of the. When I went down there and talked at MTPPA, there's about this many folks, maybe a little more in the room. They all knew each other. Everybody was, you know, I mean, it was pretty cool. And same thing when ETPA gets together, and you know, I just don't want that to be lost, you know.
Have a driving force of a main state chapter for all chapter purposes related to NIGP or legislation, but yet in some way you would still just kind of have the best of both worlds. Still have your small group meetings and then have your
Yeah, I was gonna ask, do we not still have our monthly meetings?
Oh, sure, you could, yeah.
And that's what we want regionally. You don't want to lose your local friend. Just think of in a perfect world.
Yeah.
Tennessee Association of Public Purchasing be bigger, stronger, everyone throwing their energy in. We have right now got 3 associations that I believe struggle to fill president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, get this agenda out, that agenda out. We just have a lot of duplication. And wouldn't it be great if TAP was like awesomer? All that energy goes into one. I didn't say 70 years.
I'm writing that down.
Bigger,
Awesome.
awesomer. I mean, bigger and better, and something that the folks that aren't involved would want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And part of something that has more momentum.
And it's, you know, I mean, Lori and I'm the webmaster for ETPA, she's TAP. She and I are constantly feeding off each other. She'll post something and I'm like, well, I'm gonna
and the
go post that.
Facebook page,
And the
you know,
Facebook page, she and Julie are doing the same thing.
share the
Oh,
same stuff all the time.
We're constantly copying each other to get stuff out. In full disclosure, so NIGP is kind of watching this. They are kind of curious to see what happens because they are aware we have 3 chapters. And so, and there were, you know, I mean, we have a chapter relations manager, Jennifer Steffen, and she and I've kind of talked a little at different things. And so one of the examples she brought me is like South Carolina is a pretty good sized state and they have 1 big chapter actually. But what they do there, they allow the regional meetings like that, but they when they do their education, they set it up so it's a traveling team and they go to the 3 different regions and provide the same education to the 3 different places. So, you know, this month you might be in East Tennessee, next month you go to Nashville and do it, the next month you're in Memphis or in a matter of weeks. So that way everybody still gets all that same education.
So the ambassadors could have not just be a part of the board, but have, and if you write your bylaws right, your ambassadors could have a voice to the board.
Oh, yeah.
To bring back to the board your region's vote, idea, communication, and I mean, because if you have 2 ambassadors, but they have no say-so or no voice, or there's not some kind of designed plan for what their purpose is, but if they are assigned a purpose, then it's going to make a place for your region to have a voice. Your 2 ambassadors.
No, the regional ambassadors need to have some responsibilities and duties, just like any other person in the executive board. We don't want them just showing up like an oxygen thief. I mean, they need to do certain things.
And, you know, I mean, we're a huge state, and I think that's part of why we have multiple chapters. I think it grew out of the need of, hey, you all are in Middle Tennessee, you want to meet, so that's why you have a chapter. And I think that's what's happened with those. Technology, I mean, we're at this point, I mean, we're streaming today, kind of. We're doing a pretty
We're
good job.
streaming today and all the way into the night
Yeah.
because it does not load properly, but we'll get it better at it.
But that may be something, if we decide that we do want to merge, then that might be something as a whole big statewide chapter we need to talk about technology-wise. Do we find a better way maybe to broadcast our meetings and have chat capabilities so you can, if you can't get there, if it's in West Tennessee and you can drive all the way there, or it's in East, then you can do that. So that's something we're kind of, I mean, I think that would have to be a consideration.
So is in an NIGP rules merger committee, do you know the information on this? That a chapter can be deemed a statewide chapter and additional chapters still exist within that same state?
They don't, there are no rules.
It doesn't work like that.
TAPP
Yeah.
is the statewide chapter.
Yeah, TAPP already is a statewide chapter. And really, ETPA has no, and I doubt that, I don't think MTPPA does either with their bylaws. It doesn't say that you have to be from East Tennessee, because in East Tennessee, we have members from Alabama, as we do
In TAPP.
in TAPP as well. And I think we want to be cautious not to restrict that, because we don't want to lose our friends to the south. They like being our members. But NIGP does not, there are no rules about what's considered a statewide chapter, or that you can't have then other chapters because you have a statewide chapter. Because there are, I'm trying to think.
Essentially, the question isn't if TAPP is going to be a statewide chapter. TAPP is a statewide chapter.
Yeah.
The question is, are these other two organizations going to dissolve?
merge.
Yes.
I prefer to say merge than dissolve, but you're true.
Well, but essentially
dissolve.
though, what, according to NIGP's, what the other two chapters would be doing
Is
is
dissolving.
agreeing to dissolve their chapter. And what they would do with the funds or whatever after that point.
And there has been in the past, one of the things I know that had scared a lot of people before, and I think it even says this somewhere on NIGP's website, it says that if a chapter dissolves, the money goes back to NIGP. We have confirmed with Jennifer that's not the case. So the money from ETPA would merge into the TAPP fund, and same thing with Middle. So we won't lose those funds.
So that makes me look at that slide that Brian brought up differently. Because the slide, he said, the advantages of having a statewide chapter, well, all those advantages exist if we already have a statewide chapter.
But not everybody's.
But not everybody's a member.
Right.
Well, that doesn't change. You can't force someone to be a member because
No.
you've dissolved the other organization they used to be a member
No.
of.
But some people have to choose on between ETPA or TAPP. Some people,
Yeah.
or some people's governments don't allow them to be.
To be in
members of
multiple
both. They only
chapters.
give funding to be a member of one.
And it's confusing. I think if I were a new person in Tennessee, I would, and I know we've been asked the question, so why are you a member in ETPA and TAPP? So ETPA, we do some things over on our side of the state that we do a lot with education. There's a lot of free education, so it's a really good thing for us. With TAPP, there again, we have the legislative committee, which is hugely important. You know, we do education as well. So it's just an advantage for us to be in both, but not everybody can do that necessarily.
For example, in West Tennessee, there is not a West Tennessee chapter.
Right.
We have a West Tennessee division that meets periodically, presumably, but they don't necessarily, they don't live in Middle Tennessee. Yes, they could be a member of MTPPA or a member of ETPA, but the chances of them being able to regularly attend a meeting there are slim. So, that's not really a viable option
Right.
for them. So, there are people in the West Tennessee area who look at this and say, ETPA has all this money for scholarships. Why doesn't TAPP do that? And, what options do we have to be able to make that happen?
Yeah.
All these things like that. And, I have answers for that, but they're difficult answers,
Yeah.
and they're not easy ways. They're not easy. None of it's easy, but there's not a good way to tell them that
The ETPA works through how money.
Yeah, exactly. That ETPA works really hard and you're not really doing very much.
No, it's not. We work very hard to raise our money.
And, it's not, there's not a politically correct way to say that.
Okay.
So, to be able to tell them that. And it's a line that I've tried to hurdle with them for a number of years now. And we've made inroads there, but it's still a difficult thing. And I think when we start taking away the chapter lines, it makes it a little easier for those educational opportunities, perhaps, where, 3 people are, maybe if there's a team of people who are doing the same educational opportunity throughout the state, then that's something that could be a possibility there that would make things a little more equitable across the state. I shared with Brian, and I won't say it in quite the same terms, but that I'm very concerned with the future of TAPP
Yes.
if we don't make change.
There's
Yep.
no momentum.
It's just a momentum.
I don't know why, that what the state has to offer, the equality of governmental purchasing people, it should be so much bigger. We should have 2 rooms this size of people, and it just doesn't have the momentum. It needs a boost or something.
And my concern is all over that with what Lori said, and I don't know if all of you know this. So when I was president last year, I drove to Memphis for a lunch and learn because I was worried. I'm afraid we're going to lose the people on the west side of the state. Lori worked really, really hard to build a lot of momentum there.
And then I moved away.
Yeah, she moved away, and we don't want to lose them. I mean, there are people. Gosh, Memphis has great resources down there of people like us that do things we do, and they might have some great idea that we don't get to hear. Like Brian said, if we don't have the whole state, we don't get to hear their ways of their doing things, their solutions, their opinions.
And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just the desires in there. Being president now, I've sent out personal emails to people.
Yeah.
People that haven't renewed, their agencies have expired. Someone's left and they haven't renewed. Is there anything I can do to talk to you about this? Why don't you come to the meeting, or do you want us to come talk to you? Anything. I've tried putting a personal touch on it to get people involved and interested. You haven't had any kind of response. It's not positive. So it's not from lack of trying.
That may not change no matter what.
That's what I'm
It
saying.
may not,
I mean, changing out the battery isn't gonna fix a broken alternator.
No, I know.
But if the composition changes, if it's more enhancing to be a part of it.
I was talking to my property assessor one day this week, and he, they were talking about their, one of their conferences at, I think it's at Montgomeryville State Park or something. He said, we'll have about at least 200 people there.
Yeah.
And I look, I think, man, I agree with the day where purchasing
have that kind of room.
association have
Yeah.
200 people, 100.
Yeah.
150, 200. I was
Oh, we
so
were excited
to
last
see
fall
the
because we
sign.
had so many, we had like 80 people last fall.
And that was so
That was
exciting.
so huge, yeah.
But I appreciate whoever initiated getting this sign for us, because it makes it more official looking. It just adds some class to our conference meeting room.
We got that, I don't remember which one of
Last year, right
you is
before-
responsible, but we got it for last year's forum in Salt Lake
That's
City
that one.
to promote I guess it was the one on the left.
Yeah, over here.
Maybe both, I don't know.
We got both at the same time.
Well, kudos to whoever did it. I like it. Thank
But
you.
we had those on display in Salt Lake City and it was well received.
I can tell you what's going to drive my vote at the end of the day on this. It's going to be which one achieves the purpose the best. The purpose, I've read the purpose statements of the bylaws from TAPP, ETPA, and MTPPA. They're almost identical, very few changes, but the common theme throughout is professional development and education within the procurement profession. That's essentially what it comes down to. So Evans's vote is going to fall down on, does a statewide chapter do that best? or is it the way we have it currently? Which one does that the best? That's going to be what decides my vote. It's which one best accomplishes the purpose.
Boyce, about the vote. So there's 40% overlap in ETPA and TAPP. We vote in both.
Yes.
I think you have to. If you're a bona fide member of both,
You've paid,
then yeah.
yeah, you've
You
paid
should have a
membership in
voice.
both.
Now you
should
want
have a
your
voice
voice
like
on
that.
So I think I have the hardest time understanding the dissolving of two organizations when the one organization is already a statewide. And let me explain, my past career, this was the structure. You know, I worked for Maryville College. We were a member of a state of Tennessee association, and we met once a year somewhere in the state of Tennessee. We were also a member of the southeastern state, and we met somewhere usually on the coast. Like we'd meet in Myrtle Beach and then we'd meet somewhere else. And that was our southern regional meeting. Then we'd also meet in a national. So I, went and presented on Facebook at a conference in Dallas, Texas once. But we were a part of Maryville College, the state, the Southeast, and the national. So I have a really hard time not understanding why I can't be a member of my area and a statewide. So why can't I be a member of ETPA, my region, and a member of a statewide, my state level?
You can. I mean, you can now, but then you still have the overlap. You still have the two websites that you're maintaining, that you've got to raise money to, I mean, those websites aren't cheap.
But those two organizations are maintaining them.
Yeah, they are, but that's your membership. People got to work to raise
A
the
lot of
money to
companies
do
will
that.
support.
Multiple. Right, a lot of
I think
companies
it's
don't
getting
support
harder and
multiple.
harder
Yep.
for everybody to be able to attend.
Yep.
Yeah, conferences. I mean, look at the attended,
Right.
I mean,
Were you
so, I mean, it's just, companies just are not
Well, and-
financially.
Yeah, and
And then like she said, trying to get, when you're trying to get a president, a vice president.
that's, yeah, like,
I mean-
okay, look at the forum committee that stood up front today. You know, what's really cool about the forum committee is that it is pretty well represented by all sections of the state. Andy was up there. We've got folks here from Middle Tennessee. I know they're not here, but there are people from West Tennessee on that forum committee, and there are people from East Tennessee. Imagine if we have that kind of committee running TAPP instead of Debbie struggling to keep the board together because we've had people that have had to leave the board. That's,
Two this year.
Yeah, we've
So
lost
far.
2 this year, and last year we lost 1.
And the efforts that's put into getting people to join your regional ETPA, if our effort was put into, instead of come join ETPA, it's come join TAPP.
We're not
We have
fighting against
local-
each other, basically.
But we have local meetings so that we can have this closeness of camaraderie. But come join TAPP. Just think if everybody's efforts were focused on getting membership in
For
TAPP.
TAPP.
Period. And as the professional organization for the state.
And that's, last year we attended, we had Terry from the ETPA and I went from TAPP. We went to the TML conference, the Tennessee Municipal League. And it was really cool because we got to talk to people that had no idea we exist. And we got to talk to those finance directors that run purchasing for those little towns and smaller counties and things like that. And both chapters got membership from that. But there again, at times they were like, so which one should I join? And I'm going TAPP because it's statewide. But then Terry's, I had my TAPP hat on. So we were almost kind of like in competition sitting, but we're still trying to do the same thing at the table, is just bring these people in to our professional organization. So that's,
I think one thing to maybe think about is to think about what TAPP can offer that the other smaller regions can't offer. And I think the number one reason for that would be is experience. There might be things in Middle Tennessee that someone needs to know in East Tennessee. And I think probably the biggest benefit that I've seen from today would be that question answer session. You could easily do a Google video thing like we saw
Hangout meeting.
earlier today, and cast it to each region all at the same time and do question and answer on the TAPP level. But then you still have the regions that are still there. So like little old West Tennessee, where as far as I know, I'm the only one.
No, you're not.
You're not. You know, we can meet in someone's house while everyone else is meeting in a big place because they have big memberships. You know, but that's something that, you know, can grow. And that would make it worth it to me, is if there was just a West Tennessee regional, I would want to be part of both, because I wouldn't want to miss out on those question answer once a month things, or something where I'm pretty new at this, so any kind of knowledge I can get is like gravy, where someone else that has been in it for 20, 25 years, they're like, okay, I'm almost done. You know, I'm ready to go to the Bahamas, and I've been in organizations like that where the more seasoned veterans of that occupation, they've been putting out years and years and years of building up people that they're going to help. But at some point, you know, 20% of the people do 80% of the work, and it gets frustrating on that administration level when those people don't do it. So that's that's my 2 cents. So I think that's, if we're gonna do that, then I would think what's TAPP gonna offer that you can't get on the East Tennessee level or the Middle Tennessee level, and that's maybe how I would build up that national.
I think a lot of it would be how it's going to be set up. I really think that is going to be the bylaws. It could be awesomer, depending upon how it's set.
Well,
No one needs to lose anything.
to,
They need to gain.
to go to what you're saying though, I mean, just straight numbers is gonna help. I'm very familiar with that. 20% of the people of an organization, a nonprofit in particular, doing all the work, if that. And in a statewide chapter scenario, you've got a larger pool, 20% is bigger. So that takes care of some of the problem and the frustration that you can feel with getting volunteers to serve and do what they need to do and so forth.
And I've been asked the question, I've been asked that question of, well, if you're the webmaster and Lori's the webmaster, then what's the problem? Well, why, you know, what's the advantage then if we merge? Well, then Lori wouldn't necessarily have to do all of it. Lori would have a couple more resources. I mean, we have like Jolene and ETPA also helps with it, and Crystal helps with it. Wow, would that be cool if you had 4 people?
One bit better.
Yeah, so you can share that workload.
Has the merger committee sent out a survey to find out about that pool? Because I think the larger pool is an assumption that the 70 people who are members of ETPA but aren't a member of TAPP will then join TAPP. But what if those 70 people don't join TAPP? The pool didn't actually get larger. So how do we know that director who has 40 people will actually register 40 people? Or he said, well, we were only a member of ETPA because it was in our backyard, but I'm not paying the money to put them in TAPP because I'm never driving to Nashville. That's why we weren't a member of TAPP in the first place, because I'm never going to Nashville.
Your regional meetings. It's always an east and
Middle.
west, middle, always.
Yeah, I think with the bylaws, that's got to be a
But it
caveat.
can
You
be
have to
But
move meetings.
the question is, have we contacted, the merger committee contacted agencies to say, if this organization dissolve, are you going to make your staff members of TAPP?
I think
Statewide.
most organizations
They
are
will,
going to want
but
you
they don't
to
want to.
be a member of
I mean, if they're,
association.
if they're gonna be a member of, if you have only one statewide,
Right.
group.
Yeah.
If they're gonna be a member of a group, it's gonna be that one. And, you've got certified people in a lot of those agencies.
need to be
that will
members.
Still have to get their membership.
They got to have the education.
That's what I'm saying. So they'll just join NIGP and they won't join TAPP because the E2. I'm saying if I have a staff now of 40 people and I don't send but 3 of them to meetings because we just only send 3 people. City of Knoxville, we have 9 people and only 5 of us came. We don't send all 9 people to meetings. We just don't. So those other organizations who, like us, don't have the money to send 9 people to Nashville, but they used to send them to a meeting that was in the backyard. They would send 12 people to that meeting. Now, when the statewide is my only option, am I going to still register all 12 of them to the state level? Or am I not going to register them at all to any level? And when it comes to certification stuff, I'll just use the NIGP chapter. I've already got to pay $700 for NIGP. I'll just do that. And
But how are
not
you
to
gonna
TAPP.
But to
I
get your
think you got it.
recertification, how are you gonna get it if you don't have local meetings to attend and local education to attend?
You're not a member.
Yeah.
And plus, when it is just TAPP and we're right there in East Tennessee, didn't that kind of just solve that if that happens? Right?
I would invite us to think of the other 2 chapters, East and Middle, not dissolving, although you may be technically correct. I guess you are technically correct, but in our minds, I think of those 2 chapters as rebranding as regional components of a new statewide chapter. And while we're at it, I would recommend we rename the statewide chapter just to kind of give it a fresh start and not have anyone have a perception that one chapter took over the other 2. I don't know what to call it. I'm not here.
Well, it's not just a matter of perception. The fact of the matter is, if everybody votes to merge, then those bylaws, at least some semblance of them, are going to go into effect. And that's going to be, in many cases, an adjustment, a significant adjustment to TAPP's bylaws. You change the bylaws of an organization, you've essentially got rid of one and got another one in place.
Right.
A reinvented one, rebranded one, if you will. So I don't see it as dissolving to go into TAPP. I see it as all 3 are changing.
Yes.
And having one statewide chapter, and I don't know what you want to call it, Tennessee statewide chapter, it doesn't matter.
With regional autonomy or semi-autonomy.
Affirmative.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great.
I think I'm sympathetic, Julie, to your concern, but I think we want to understand this as an opportunity for maybe pooling the resources and the strengths of all 3 chapters into a new one coordinated.
Awesomer chapter.
Awesomer.
Yes, you would have regional.
But still have regional coverage.
It'd be like a big church that has small groups, right?
Amen.
Well, there are a lot of other, though, state, my husband is in Tennessee Society of Respiratory Care. They have a Smoky Mountain chapter. That's what they call themselves. You know, and then the middle area calls themselves something. So it would be exactly what you're talking about, Ron.
Does he pay membership to the rebranding or just the state?
State.
But they meet as their own little Smoky Mountain bunch.
I'm pretty sure they just pay to the state.
I think almost every profession has, like my husband's photographer, he's a member of this photographic guild, Professional Photographic Guild. He's a member of TPPA, which is Tennessee Professional Photography Association. He's a member of PPA, which is the national. It's a norm, but as a national organization with PPA, you know, they go to Congress and they talk about copyright. You know, they have the numbers that way. Same thing with our Tennessee Association. If someone wants to become a master classical photographer, that's where they have to go to get their prints judged to see if they have merit. You know, there's different hierarchy that you can't get with the smaller chapter. But our smaller chapter, we would have a speaker that would come in every month to our local meetings so that we would learn what's going on in our area. And they would have speakers that would go, you know, to each of the chapters throughout the month. So, I mean, that's something that could feasibly happen, but it wasn't like, the smaller regional chapters were a lot less structured than a big board that would make big decisions. It was more of a small group get together. And then the the larger group would be the one that would organize the speakers that would go to the regional areas. So you're not missing out on that.
I'm about 10 minutes over what we plan to do, so.
Are we good for now? Do we want more discussion? We can always discuss it tomorrow, some more. I mean,
Thank
it's
you
all.
for allowing this discussion.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all iffy. It depends on how it comes out, but I think it's worth looking at. You know, we need a boost. We definitely, I love your perception of the rebranding. Thanks.
I think maybe the whole new name would be more palatable for everybody.
And that way that there's not like, you don't want to say like you have three kids
Give it
at
up.
once or right.
Right.
You know, you've got one brand new kid.
And I know,
That's awesome.
Jennifer has told me that if we decided if we wanted to do that, to rename, we just have to have I think it's member council has to approve it.
And I'll throw this out, I don't know what it means, but you guys know Jane Ogle, and she's one of our founders.
Is she
of-
that
she's
She's in
part
TAPP,
of-
yeah.
she
I
is
thought she
a-
was, yeah.
It's her fault.
And I thought, you know, we got talking about this, I meet with her regularly, and she's still very involved, as you all know, in the association vote. And, you know, and I was kind of surprised, I thought that she would have an issue, you know, of any kind of a big change. She thinks it needs something. She hates to see it kind of flounder, that something needs to happen. And she's actually for taking a look at something new, because I mean, we're facing looking if dissolving the original chapter of TAPP if that were to happen. And times have changed, and I think she knows, she's acknowledged that we really need something to happen. Just throwing that out there.
Good to know.
Founding fathers
Right.
have acknowledged,
Another.
yes. With that said, if there's no more conversation, I really appreciate it.